Alright, let's dismantle the patriarchy by talking about magic systems and science fiction. Cheers. Welcome everybody to the part of the internet where I tell you that you're a conservative sexist if you like hard sci-fi and hard magic systems, because that drives engagement if you start yelling at me in the comments, so please do that. Alright, what do I actually mean by all of this? Because I do have something of an idea here that I want to, talk about. And that is about the terms hard magic system versus soft magic system and hard sci-fi versus soft sci-fi. And I hope you'll hear me out, because maybe there's something we actually could learn from this. And before we really start, let me say one thing. Yes, you can like hard magic systems, and you can enjoy soft magic systems, and you can enjoy soft sci-fi, and you can enjoy hard sci-fi. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the terminology here. So, let's begin. See, my starting point is that for a lot of weird reasons, when you look at fantasy and sci-fi discourse, there is a perception out there that says that hard sci-fi is somehow superior to soft science fiction, and that hard magic systems are somehow superior to soft magic systems. And I think that's a problem, because they are not superior, they are different. Now the question is, where does this perception come from, and why is it still there? So, let's look at what we mean by hard sci-fi, what we mean by hard magic systems, and so forth. See, hard science fiction in a lot of ways is perceived as science fiction books that have a lot of science in them, a lot of hard science in them, by which most people usually mean STEM science, physics. Maths and physics are definitely king. Biology and chemistry are still acceptable, and the more you search into the social sciences, or what you might call humanities, the less hard the science is perceived. And that's where the hard sci-fi thing kind of usually ends up with. Now let's look at hard magic systems versus soft magic systems. According to the inventor of the terminology, Brian Sanderson, hard magic systems are the ones where you have all the rules and they're laid out and they're very clear, whereas soft magic systems are, well, less clearly defined, and some things may happen without being explained in excruciating detail beforehand, and so forth. So what do those two have in common? Well, see, I would argue that both are about structures. Because what science does, it gives us a structure for how the world works. And especially when you look at sciences like physics and mathematics, it gives us a structure that explains not only how the world works, but how we can make the world work. They are rules that we can use to solve problems. And, well, hard magic systems do very much the same thing. They give us the rules for the game, the rules of how to run through all these problems and solve them, which makes hard magic systems very, very popular in, well, role-playing games and computer games, which is where they can be fun, and which is sort of the engagement that you get out of those when you read a book. You get all the rules laid out first, and then you as the reader can try to figure out how the characters will actually solve the problem by, following the same rules. So what does all of that say? Well, these kind of structures tell us who we are and where we belong and how to actually get to solutions. They give us rules that we can follow to solve our problems. And that's fine and dandy. But there's a problem there, and that is, it only works in very specific circumstances. Now let's look at other situations where we have structures. Because see, well, our lives, especially in what you might call the West, have been very structured. There's a lot of structures out there. There is the patriarchy, there is racism, there is capitalism, there's a bunch more. Those structures do one thing. They are structures of oppression, and they are structures that build hierarchies that explain to each and every one within that structure, within that system, who we are and where we belong, and yeah, where we should stay, and also how to behave to maybe solve problems within those structures. And that's how a lot of things have always happened, because we as humans try to, cling to rules. They make life easier. I get it. However, and this is where we come to my main argument. That is, some of these structures have slowly changed over the last couple of decades. They have slowly evolved or been dismantled because, well, as I said, they're systems of oppression, and oppression's kind of bad, right? So, we've started to dismantle the patriarchy in some bits and pieces. We've also started to dismantle some forms of racism. I'm not saying we've done that yet. I'm saying we have started on these issues. And what happens in those situations is that some of the rules that we used to follow, some of the rules that told us who we are and all our rights and, privileges and stuff like that, all the things we can do and should be able to do and so forth, some of those are falling away. And that means for some of us, people like me, that we're losing some of these privileges. We're no longer top of the hierarchy necessarily, because other people, well, they're the same as us, or they should be. And that can be somewhat scary. That can be somewhat frightening. See, the less rules we have, the less hard our structures are, the more freedom there is, but the more uncertainty there can be for those of us who have always implicitly relied on these rules. And that's kind of where we have our main argument here. So let's continue with the question, how does all of that connect to fantasy and sci-fi? Well, I would argue that, fantasy and science fiction, being something of an escapist pastime, do still offer these kind of rules. So people that have started to lose, these rules and have begun to face uncertainties in real life do cling to those elements in their fiction. At least there, man can still be man and all the rules work, and we can just follow the rules to solve all our problems. And by solving problems, we mean to come out ahead and on top. And that can be comforting. That can be really comforting. And that's one reason why I would argue hard magic systems and hard sci-fi are rather popular with a very specific part of the population, that being the part of the population that has begun to, has the least to gain when it comes to privilege within our world, when we start to dismantle systems like racism and patriarchy and capitalism. But that only answers one question, and that is the question of popularity. I would argue there's a second layer there, and that's the layer that says, why do you think one of those is superior to the other? And for that, we'll do a quick linguistic interlude. Let's play a game. Let's look at magic systems. And let's change the terminology. Let's say instead of hard magic system versus soft magic system, we have a closed magic system versus an open magic system. One where all the rules are laid out, and one where not all the rules are laid out at the beginning. Does it still sound like the closed one is superior to the open one? Or let's change it to a strict magic system versus a flexible magic system. One where all the rules are, laid down in stone, and one where there's some wiggle room to experiment and maybe move things a bit. One that's, less mechanical and a bit more human, for example. Do we still think that those, rigid ones, the strict one, is better than the flexible one? Do we think the mechanical system is better than the more human one? My point is that terminology matters, that words matter, and hard has, it's coded as is soft. In a lot of ways, in our society, we think that hard is better than soft. It is coded in gender ways. Masculinity is hard, femininity is soft. You look at books, some people call women the soft gender. And Well, within patriarchy, there's a hierarchy between men and women, isn't there? So there's that. Well, also under capitalism in our current system, we think that being hard means you win competitions, being soft means you lose. There is, within those terms we've chosen to define, or to, well, not to define, but to call these different ways of writing fiction, there is a hierarchy within those terms, and I think that's the second part to this puzzle that I wanted to explore today, which means, while some of us may prefer, well, books where we have strict rules that we can look at, fictional parts of physics, imaginary physics, and so forth, well, we may love to explore those elements. That's up to everyone. We can all do that. That's fine. But it's not superior to someone exploring, well, questions of gender. At the end of the day, an Arthur C. Clarke novel is not superior to a Ursula K. Le Guin's novel, or, well, a Brandon Sanderson magic system is not superior to a J.R. Tolkien magic system. They are what they are because they do different things, but because we have attached specific terminologies to them. One of them can be perceived as superior to the other, and that's what I want to talk about today, and that's where I see the problem. So what I'm saying is that as long as we say hard magic system versus soft magic system, that hierarchy of one being superior to the other is built in. It's implicit in the words that we use. As long as we say hard sci-fi versus soft sci-fi, that hierarchy of one being superior to the other, that is built in because of the terminology we use. And it's interesting because a while ago, people didn't use soft sci-fi, they just used space opera. And space opera is not as coded as is soft science fiction. So the question is, why do we use these terminologies and why do we cling to them? And I would say that is where a conservative outlook has still taken over, or, well, in parts taken over when we talk about sci-fi, or has a hold on our genre fiction, because we love those structures. A part of us, a part of the readership, part of the audience, loves those structures and is yearning for places where that hierarchy is still there, where being an ace in STEM science, which has, would have been masculine coded for a long time, makes you cool. Understanding all the weird rules is cool. Asking questions about what they mean is not so cool. So that's where those two things come together. Our need, at least for some people, for a more conservative bend, who like their rules and are missing some of their privilege in society, they love those hard rules, and they choose the kind of terminology that keeps that hierarchy built into the genre description. Now, I would say that's rather silly, because at the end of the day, these rules can be fun, but what is more important is like what they do to us, how we actually use those rules, what we do with them. It is those soft questions, the humane questions, the questions of humanity, that will actually finally decide how things work. It's not the algorithm, it's not the individual implementations, it's what we use them for, what we do with them, that actually matter, which is why when you look at especially science fiction, there's a general bend towards the more soft side of science fiction over the last couple of decades. Calculating speed for imaginary rocket engines is fun, but it's not exactly the big questions that we face as humanity right now. Calculating and arguing over the size of a ring world may be fun for math nerds at like 3 in the morning, but it doesn't actually solve the problems that we face at the moment. For that, we need to turn towards those, well, human questions. And that is where we should maybe stop using terminology like hard and soft that has this weird hierarchy built in, because we haven't dismantled the patriarchy enough, we haven't dismantled capitalism enough to actually get rid of that implication, that implied hierarchy between terms like soft and hard. We haven't done that yet. Maybe we should actually use other terms like, mechanical versus human, or strict versus flexible, or closed versus open, because those express the same thing, but they are differently weighted. Anyway, that's sort of my thoughts on the subject that I just came up with right now because I'm slow at writing my larger video at the moment. So I thought I'd do this for a change. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it made you think. If you disagree with me, please comment. I need the engagement. If you enjoyed it, please comment. Also like, subscribe, share the video. If you want to help me out, I'm still struggling with a lot of like personal problems, financial problems and so forth. There's a GoFundMe link below. If you can't help me out there, that's fine. No one has to. If you want to share it instead, that's also fine. That does help me out a lot as well. If you want to support me in the long run, there's a Patreon down there. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching. I can't wait to actually start discussing this with you. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks and cheers.